Mike.
I'm Brad.
And this is Ministry Chemistry.
Good. Can you say it faster?
Here we go.
Hello again. Welcome to Ministry Chemistry. Yes, you're stuck with Mike and Brad this week. Please don't tune out just because Renee is not here. She in
does
her
have
absence. In her absence, we have the lovely Kat with us today. Say hello to everyone, Kat.
Hello.
Thanks for being with us, Kat. Kat, could you just introduce us to yourself? Tell the Ministry Chemistry audience who you are and maybe why you're here today.
I am Kathleen Paul, and everybody knows me as Cat Paul.
You sound so official. Stop it. Just stop it.
My name is Bradley.
No, I've been NYI president here at PICNAS long time.
A long time.
And I've worked with Brad since the beginning of his ministry.
Which is
so
what, like
7.5 years?
Yeah, we were talking about that. Almost 8 years.
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
And how long? So you were with Shane, right?
Yes.
Before. How long did you work with Shane?
About a year and a half.
Okay. So you've been in youth ministry. For anyone who doesn't know, NYI means Nazarene Youth International. So that's kind of our
the
club.
voice for the
Yeah.
board, the voice for the youth on the board.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I always tell people, like, we go to, youth leader lunches and our Baptist friends. I'm like, I'm Nazarene, but I'm not better than you. So we have a pretty good time with that. So Kat has been in youth ministry for almost 10 years now.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
Crazy.
Which is
Almost 10
crazy.
years here, but
Yeah.
isn't it longer?
Yeah, I also worked with the youth at another church too.
Yeah.
So just for a short time.
There you go.
There you go.
Craziness.
She's been in it, in the thick of it.
So we obviously in Renee's absence, we wanted to have a token female on the show today. So
I
that's
need
Kat.
a little estrogen.
I'm totally joking. If you listen to last week's, we talked about complementarian versus egalitarian and all these like big theological words.
that I couldn't spell.
That will not happen with me.
No, we're not going to go there with Kat today. But Brad and I were talking last night about what does Kat bring to the table, and there's a lot of things. One of the things is Kat. I'm hoping that comes out in the next few minutes. But Kat has a much larger personality than what you're getting right now. It's amazing. You put a microphone in front of someone, you're like,
I don't know what to say.
my name is Mike. I like to play.
So wrong.
It's okay. It took us about 12 and a half episodes to break out of that. Anyway, so we realized, Brad and I realized that everyone who's been on this show, so obviously the trifecta of Brad, Renee, and Mike, and then we had Zach on a couple weeks ago. Everyone comes from a called into full-time ministry, I'm using air quotes here, perspective on what ministry is and what it means to you. And so we were excited to have you on the show today, but you bring kind of the lay leader, if you will, perspective to use kind of an official term for that. So tell us about like what your kind of your role is. I know NYI president sounds official, but I mean, just like when you walk into youth ministry on a Wednesday night or you walk into church on Sunday morning, like what does that mean to you? Like what hat do you put on to play your role?
It sounds funny, but I think I put on the mama cat hat.
Oh, okay.
It's true.
Most of the kids know I'm going to give them a hug. Most of the kids know that I'm going to try to give them encouragement. And, I love to laugh. I love to have a good time. And so I enjoy just spending time with them and having those moments. But I also like diving deep with them and sitting down and having those deep conversations, which end up being sometimes scary at moments because they can go really deep, and you're just sitting there listening to them. And my take has always been, if this is my kid sitting in front of a youth leader, what would I want them to say to my child or my teen? So that's just always been my mentality heading in. But yeah, I'd say basically my role in the group, and I think a lot of the teens would admit it too, because some of them have called me mom through the years. And is definitely Mama Cat.
Some still do, and they've moved on.
Yeah, they still do.
Well, that's awesome, though. I think that shows their relationship with you.
Yeah.
Do you think, and maybe there's no way of knowing this for sure, do you think you get maybe a little bit different perspective as far, or maybe even feedback is a better word,
Mm-hmm.
than Brad does, being in the full-time youth pastor role.
Yeah, probably. I would assume so. Sometimes the girls want to say something that they don't want to say to Brad, but they'll say it to me, you
Yeah.
know, which is not that it's anything he shouldn't know, but it's just a girl thing. And,
Oh, yeah.
you know, they want a woman's perspective on it, I guess.
Yeah.
So definitely, I think so. Plus, I have Brad's 2 daughters that, you know,
That don't want to talk to me.
they have to have that other person
Yeah.
in youth group that they can go to, and instead of, you know, so they feel like they have someone.
Did it take you a little bit to? Well, I mean, you've been in for 10 years, so
Mhm.
you've kind of watched those girls grow up.
Right,
So
right.
I'm sure you kind of had trust with them coming in.
Right.
Did it take you a little bit for them to trust like what they were willing to say?
I think so, because I'm friends with Brad
Right.
and, you know, and Jill, and so the 2 of them I consider friends of mine, and so I think for his daughters there, you know, there has to be that safe place that they can talk to. You know, you always have those moments where you know when you need to say something and you know when you don't. And I always believe the youth pastor needs to know what's going on with his youth group, but there are things that, you know, somebody might say to you that need to be kept private.
That's like walking a balancing beam.
It is.
And I
It
had
is.
that
Yeah,
with-
it really is.
It's funny. Our former pastor, his kids kind of grew up and grew into the youth ministry, so it was a little bit. There's trust factor already there, but then our new pastor came in about a year and a half ago with 2 teenagers,
Yeah.
and it took a little time to build that trust. Not that he didn't trust me personally. It was just, are you going to go and tell my dad
Right.
everything that I
Right.
share in small
Exactly.
group? You know, and
Exactly.
it's a balancing act of, okay, what does that need to know, which
Right.
we haven't crossed that line yet,
Right.
versus, you know, hey, what can I keep in confidence
Right.
to build that trust?
And
Right.
we have small groups on Sunday afternoons. We have a girls group and a boys group, and I used to sit in on those 2 groups. And once my daughters moved up into the group, it was clear that my oldest daughter Anna, she was not going to share while I was sitting there. So I've pulled back from either one of those groups. Because it seems as though, at least in that setting, all of the kids are a little more reserved, and they don't open up as much. The boys group is much smaller, and we had several adult males in there, so the ratio of things probably limited conversation as much as my presence. It wasn't necessarily me, but just taking the title, quote unquote, out of the equation usually tended to open up conversation for them.
I'm glad you went there with title, because I was thinking about something. In ministry, in church, we love titles. We talked about this on the show before. Like, we attach the word ministry to everything.
Yes.
Well, you're a parking lot cigarette butt sweeper upper minister. You know, so
I want that job. No.
yeah, right. But we've argued.
We'll add it to your to-do
Somebody
list.
We've argued like the merits and demerits of it, and one of the things we wanted your perspective on is when people talk about ministry and it being a calling, typically they think pastor. They attach the word pastoral calling.
Right.
But I mean, I would argue that lay leadership, to attach another title to it, is no less of a calling. It's just a different. So
I totally
could
agree.
you speak into that a little bit?
I've thought about this through the years a lot, because I've had people say, well, you ought to go get your minister's license. And I'm like, but that's not what I feel like I'm supposed to do. I feel like God has me in this position for a reason, and I feel like this is where I'm supposed to be. And this is, I don't feel like you necessarily need to be a pastor to impact people.
Right.
And don't take anything away from pastors, because yes, I mean, I've had tons of pastors impact me in my life, but I've also had just as many lay people come alongside of me. When I first got saved, I was 21 years old, and I had an amazing group of lay people women come around me and just help me through that process. So when I look at that, I think about those women, and that's what I want to be to the person coming up underneath me. Is I want to be that person that lifts them up and gives them the confidence to say, you know, you don't have to be a pastor. You can minister to somebody being a layperson within your church. And
I'm glad you went there with, and I was trying to think out how to ask that, and I couldn't wrap my head around it, but you answered it. Like, so that's something that you have wrestled with in your own life and your prayer life, and I'm sure with your husband and your family. Of, is this something? And I use this word, and I hesitate. Is this something I want to pursue further? And that's not to say that you've only gone so far.
Right.
It's just I don't know a better word to attach.
Yeah.
To it.
Yeah, I get what you're saying completely. It's just it's one of those things that I believe people are called to be pastors, but I also believe there's people called to do youth ministry that doesn't require them getting a pastor degree, and and going in with that that same heart of Christ that everybody needs. I mean, Jesus is, to me, was I needed to know how to be Jesus to others, and how did I learn that is by people being Jesus to me. And so I just wanted to put that forward.
I think I think people who have felt that call into full-time ministry, as we say, and like I said, I don't think there's anything less full-time about what you're doing. I mean, you work, you're a mom, and you serve faithfully in the youth. And I know that because I've witnessed it myself. But there's this, I think there's a bit of an expectation from church leaders, and I'm not trying to throw anyone particularly on the bus, like, well, everyone should be called to ministry in some aspects. But some of those same people would be like, well, why is there no one to make my fries at McDonald's today? Oh, well, because everyone was called into full-time ministry, and we don't consider that a ministry. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, I read a really good book recently called Every Good Endeavor, and it was all about calling and exploring the biblical aspect of calling, and how that is all-encompassing. It's not just I'm called to be a senior pastor. I'm called to be a youth pastor. Like, I love that you're saying I feel called to be
right where I'm at.
A leader, but not just in a pastoral sense.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And I agree with you, because I know how much Brad values that for sure.
Now, I joked with Renee when she was at our youth speaking, and she said, I learned Kat was a grandma. That is not what I said. I am not a grandma yet. I said
Not
I
yet.
will probably be a grandma and still doing youth ministry at some point. And somehow she computed I was a grandma. Although I do have a child that's 25 and one that my youngest is 5. So,
Do the math.
yeah.
Math
it
is
can
our
happen,
friend.
But
So, all right, I'm going to ask this so that you don't age yourself, okay?
Yes, she is younger than I am.
No. Well, you aged yourself, dude. I aged myself in a sermon last week. It was pretty funny. And I'm still younger than both of you. So, ha-ha. For what it's worth, when we were talking about, okay, who do we fill in for with Renee? Because Brad and I could talk forever, but who knows where that would go. We need someone to keep us on track.
This episode is 3 hours long.
Exactly. We're talking about who won the last PGA tournament. I don't even remember. I was going to say, you're the first name that Renee threw out.
Oh.
She's like, oh, you should. But it was funny. She's like, who's the really awesome lady that you have in your youth ministry, Brad, I got to work with? Oh, Kat. I mean, everyone knew, like, immediately.
that's so funny.
Yeah. No, it's awesome. I mean, that shows.
Well, Brad's always making fun of the way I talk. So I was like, yeah, this is not going to be good, me talking.
If you've listened to any episode, then you know who gets made fun of for how they talk. Yeah. Really? I'm gonna make it my mission to say naked on every single episode now.
Naked's my. I
Just
say
because.
it like that now every day, every chance I get. Naked.
Well, it's
is
funny
on
because
my
you have to
lip.
make effort to say it like that, and I don't know how.
I
else
actually
to say it.
don't
Is there
anymore.
another way to say it?
One of my college roommates is from just outside Birmingham, Alabama, and the time I was rooming with him, I think it was maybe 6 months, and I could have been Alabama. I could have been a person.
You pick it up quick.
Yeah, it's like,
I tell my wife,
I'm from Hewittown, Alabama.
country rubs off.
It
man.
does.
It does.
Country is contagious.
Yeah.
What's funny is when I just out of high school, I went to a school just north of Chicago, and a lot of people were from Wisconsin and Minnesota, and everybody thought I was from the deep South. I'm like, I'm from Southwest Ohio.
Yeah.
But I got a lot.
Well,
I got a long line of redneck in
If
me.
you're from
so-
Cleveland, that is deep south, right?
Very true.
So I want to talk about just your personal experience, because I know my story and Brad's story, and I'm gathering yours is probably somewhat similar.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot of people, and I know we have audience members who are not in ministry, and I'm guessing we have audience members who don't even go to church, and so some of this is, we've talked about Christianese a lot. So when people hear the word calling, I think they think of this like Moses burning bush experience. You know, like God literally woke you up from a slumber and said, Kat, I want you to be a volunteer youth leader at the Picnaz, in the Picnaz youth. But typically speaking, it doesn't happen that way. So can you tell us about your experience and how you felt called into or brought into?
I went in kicking and screaming. As funny as that sounds, Shane, who used to be the youth pastor here, came up to me one Sunday. He said, I think you'd be great to work with the youth. And I'm like, nah, I just don't think that's my thing anymore. He said, no, I really think you ought to think about it. And I'm like, oh, I'll think about it. I'll pray about it, and I kind of pushed it back. Well, he would come up about once a week, and I really think you need to work with youth ministry. So I finally said, okay, I'll go on the whitewater rafting trip. The real reason why I didn't want to go in is my daughter was in youth group at that time, and so I didn't want to go in and cramp her style. And so I had a conversation with her and asked her, would she mind if I went in and worked as a youth leader? I said, if you have a problem with it, because that was my out. If you have a problem with it,
wink, wink.
Yeah,
if you have a
I
problem,
won't do it. She
Please
goes,
say yes. Please say yes.
yeah. She goes, no, I tell you everything anyway. I think that'll be fine. I'm like, oh, okay.
That's not what I wanted to hear.
I surrender, Jesus.
So it sounds funny I say that, but it wasn't until my first year working with the teens and still feeling like I wasn't in my spot that first year. I felt like a fish out of water. Wasn't sure how to connect. Everybody was really connected to them and his wife, and I just wasn't for sure how to get my foot in to where God wanted me to be in the youth group. And then I was at a youth event and just felt God say, all I want you to do is love them. And it was so weird. It sounds so simple.
Yeah.
But that is exactly where I knew, okay. And that's when I started becoming Mama Cat. It was just, I turned into being Jesus to them, trying to show them how to love each other, how to love and show love to others. And so it sounds funny. To me, it was a slow calling. It was that, God kept wooing me. And then finally I said, okay.
Was there something that preceded that? Like, were you serving in some area of the church that kind of put you on Shane's radar?
No, we actually started attending in 2009. And one of the things Shane had talked about was there was going to be a big missionary trip to Trinidad and Tobago. And, you should do that. You should do that. Well, I love plays and doing all kinds of things with drama.
Yeah.
And so we did a murder mystery. And that was kind of like, once I started doing that kind of stuff, I wasn't ministering anywhere in the church. I just strictly went right into youth ministry when I finally found my place. So it just, I don't know what it was. It just gelled. And I had these teens that wanted to do drama, and they were jumping in saying, yeah, let's do this. And one of them now is a youth leader. So it's really sad, but I mean, I look at it. Gary was one of those teens that did that murder mystery with us, and now he's a youth leader in the youth department with us. So it's just crazy how that works. But
No, that's great, and that's a great example of what I was talking about. There's a quote in a book that I read, and it said, when God wants to send a message, He wraps that message in a person and sends that person. I mean, and that's a perfect example. My story's similar. It was just, okay, I'm going to plug into what I can.
Right.
And then, one thing led to another, and the same. I mean, I would definitely say slow calling. I mean, Brad started as basically the janitor.
Yeah.
And one thing led to another. And so, I mean, object lesson from that, if you're unsure, you don't feel like you have this like divine calling, God's not whispering in your ear, find where there's a need, and God's going to open doors where you to
they
use
needed
your
money.
Gifts and talents.
They needed money to go to Trinidad and Tobago, and this was how we were going to do it. And it was through these murder mysteries and all these things what the teens were putting on. And so, that's how I first got my foot in the door. And then my husband and I both went on that trip to Trinidad and Tobago. And it was just after that, I just fell in love with them. And I just knew that was what I was supposed to do.
It seems that a lot of people think it's this grand thing.
Yeah.
You have to figure out the equation to what it is to work in youth ministry. And it's just being you and being authentic. If you can be authentic and talk with teens, you're exactly who they need. The one thing that I talk about with all the people that are adult leaders in our youth group is I want you, it's 4 things. I want you to live a life worth imitating. I want you to love them right where they are. I want you to challenge them to take the next step. And finally, and probably most importantly, is I want you to be the person that you needed when you were that age. Yeah. If you can connect with that, you can do youth ministry. You're powerful just in yourself.
And one of the big things, and when I got lost, I was around 14 when I really started to pull away from God. And it was because we moved here from North Carolina. I lost my youth group. We came here, and I could never fit in anywhere. No one made me feel accepted. And it was like, and I'm like, I went to one youth thing at a church. Not even the leaders came up and talked to me. The entire time I sat over on a couch, and not one person came over to speak with me. And I was like, I never want to be that youth leader.
Yeah.
I want to be that youth leader that says, hey, there's a new person sitting over here, and I'm going to find out who they are, and I'm going to love on them and hope they feel a part of what we are doing here. And but that was one of my driving forces when I went into youth ministry, was that I want to make every teen feel.
Nobody sits alone.
Yeah, I want to make every teen feel like I care about them. And
it's funny. It was so counterintuitive to me, and it I think I realized those concepts in the back of my head, but it didn't really click until we tried small church, but we tried doing event stuff, and like 75% of our youth meeting was like games and fun, which takes so much more planning than just doing what you should be doing, which is teaching the Bible and having a discussion. But when we kind of transform that, and we're like, you know what, let's do some events for fellowship, but let's not put all of our efforts into that, and let's not worry about planning games every week. Let's just focus on like making it a tight-knit family environment. We grew, and it was like, this is not fun at all. Why are you coming? Seriously. I mean, that was what I was thinking in my head. But we literally, I mean, we've had kids come and stick around that are a part of large churches with big programs. And it was just, I think they just felt more at home, That's when you guys talk about how, like you said, just love on them. And Brad and I have talked about this before, the whole high church concept of aging out of youth ministry. You don't age out of loving kids. No. You know what I mean? Like, some of the best youth leaders I've seen are in their. I mean,
Have
one of the most
walkers.
awesome youth leaders I ever saw was probably in 75, and he just. I'm sure at some point you'll be Grandma Cat.
I'm sure.
if you stick
Well,
around, if you make it that long.
What was that lady when we went to the the youth workers conference? 50 years in youth ministry.
Oh, yeah.
50 years.
You know what? It's so we use that. I've used that
was
as
like,
an example.
whoa.
I will use that as an example many times.
That's
she was
incredible.
at least 75
Oh,
years
it
old,
was
right?
incredible.
Somebody help her stand up.
Exactly.
She's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, and you have to love it to spend that much time in it, and
Whenever I've recruited new youth leaders, the first question I ask is, why do you want to do this? And it's not that I'm looking for one specific answer, but the last thing you want to hear is because I want to be a youth pastor. It's like, that's a red flag.
yeah.
But the best answers I've heard are just what you said. One of our youth leaders who's moved on to other things, but that was exactly, she went on a mission trip and she connected with some girls and she kind of like popped up on the radar, and I sat down with her and I was like, hey, have you considered this? Yeah, I've been thinking about it. Well, why do you want to be in youth ministry? And same as yours, I went on this mission trip and I just fell in love with those girls. And that's one of those things. It's like, you know what, not polished around the edges of some youth leaders, and that probably say some things that would like make the hair stick up on the back of your head, and you're like,
I'm still doing that.
Please don't say that. But it's like you can't fake loving on people in general. I know we're talking about this from a youth ministry context, but just people in general. You can't fake that.
Can't
Well,
fake
and
the
the
authenticity.
teens know it.
Oh yeah.
They can spot it a mile away, whether you want to be there or whether you don't want to be there. And they know, and they know exactly how you feel about them too, by the way you made them feel.
Yeah.
And and that's important that we keep that in our minds at all times, because even when we're having a bad day, not that we're not allowed to have a bad day, but even when we have a bad day, we have to make sure that doesn't fall into their lap and become part of, whatever they're struggling with, and so loving on them sometimes means putting what I have going on in my life to the side. And that's hard to do sometimes, but.
Well, I think that's one of like a secular concept that makes so much sense in a ministry world is you should always have someone above you and below you. And that gets hard at some points, like I always feel bad for our senior pastor, who's you're above you, who's pouring into you,
for real, yes.
and a peer. So there's got to be an outlet so that you're not letting it all out on the kids or whoever it is that you're ministering to, because then you become, I don't know. I guess there's some context where it's like it's okay for them to minister to you because they're getting something out of that too.
Right.
I'm sure you would say that you've grown in the last 10 years just from pouring into other people.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's when you go on those missions trips, you go to serve other people, but you receive
being,
so much from
absolutely.
it yourself, and that's not why I went, but that was what I got in return.
Happening.
The other thing I wanted to mention about the authenticity when you're speaking with a teenager and they can tell when you're not being real is if you're going to have a conversation with them, lock eyes. And it's in a youth room, in a youth setting, there's so much going on around you. There's so much. It's so easy to be distracted while they're talking, but just being able to be fully present in that conversation, no matter what else is happening, no matter what else is going on around you, it translates so much to love, and that they might not be able to put their finger on it, but it speaks volumes, and that's where the relationships tend to grow the most, is at least from my time in youth ministry, just being focused on exactly what they're saying. You might have somebody standing right next to you, wanting to talk to you, but you don't look away.
Presence
Yeah.
speaks volumes.
The ministry of presence.
Yep,
Or the
for
that
sure.
ministry word again.
And I'm going to say this, and I know it sounds maybe a little crazy, but it has kept me stronger in my study of the word.
Knowing you have someone depending on you.
Yes, knowing
Yeah.
I have, and that not that I wouldn't already have a love for it, and I mean I've always had a passion for studying the word, but those girls, when they ask those questions, I'm like, I don't know, but I will get back with you on
Yeah.
that. I will check. I mean, I'll email.
They ask
people,
questions you never thought about.
Yeah, and or think of things in ways I've never thought of
Yeah.
them before.
Makes
and
it a lot of fun.
It really does, and I enjoy so much my Sunday nights with the girls because they challenge me as much as I think I challenge them sometimes.
Yeah.
Because they come up with some real strong questions.
So I want to wrap this up with a Bob Goff quote today because I love Bob Goff. But Kat's story, all of our stories, just reminded me of this quote. And he said, stop asking for permission, just do. Just love.
Yeah.
So if you're thinking about what calling means to you, I hope that Kat's story is an example. I know you hear the pastoral side of things, but there's so much more to a calling than just being a pastor. So maybe spend some time this week thinking about what does calling mean to me? Where can I explore my gifts and talents? And maybe just where's there a need that I can plug into and allow God to open some doors for what his calling might be on my life. And for this week's Ministry Chemistry, I am still Mike.
I'm Kat.
And Brad.
Signing off.